everyone, this is your host Ariana. Welcome to the first episode of the Women Startup Leaders series. In this series, key female ecosystem players from Bangladesh and beyond will discuss facets of angel investing and all things startups. In the first episode, we have Anita Ghazi Rahman as speaker and Nujur Rahman, CEO of Bangladesh Angels, as moderator.
So I will do my very best to attempt to introduce our speaker, but obviously she's got a very lengthy and very, very accomplished kind of portfolio. But I'll try to do it justice. So bear with me. So Anita Ghazi Rahman is a qualified barrister and advocate of both tiers of the Bangladesh Supreme Court. Anita Apu obtained her LLB honors degree from the University College London in 2002 and was called to the Bar of England and Wales from Lincoln's Inn, London in 2003, completing her bar vocational course on the College of Law. Anita Apu is the founder and managing partner of the Legal Circle, a very renowned law firm in Dhaka, the founder editor of Think Legal Bangladesh, the first of its kind free, open, and crowdsourced web-based legal resources platform, as well as the founder and publisher of Legal Circle Law Reports, LCLR. Anita Apu is an independent director of the Chittagong Stock Exchange and a constant mentor to the burgeoning Bangladeshi startup ecosystem since its inception. And I'm also really proud to say that I think she's also becoming an investor as well, actively. Anita Apu devotes a substantial amount of time to pro bono legal work, which includes being the co-counsel in the public interest litigation in which the High Court Division issued guidelines for rendering mandatory emergency medical services to victims of traffic accidents and created awareness of Good Samaritans. Anita Apu's areas of practice includes all aspects of corporate, company, and securities law, including litigation, corporate advisory work, and business structuring and formation. She's also an alumni of the Asia Society's 21 class of 2016 and Common Purpose. The way we're going to structure this session, it's sort of going to be divided into two parts. The first part, we'll kind of, obviously she's been very generous with her time, and sometimes we don't get to know her enough about how she came into what she's doing, and so we'll spend a little bit more on her career, and then the second half will be more of the Q&A and asking some questions, some burning questions, I guess, about the legal mechanics of angel investing. But Anita, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Absolutely, and yeah, I think it's interesting. I think not many people get to say this, because I think besides you and the other person we have in common, Minhaj Bhai, I think both of you are one of the few people I think who've seen different iterations of me in Bangladesh. This is Bangladesh Angels is sort of my third gig, and I think we've sort of interacted with in all of them. And so I think in many ways both of you have seen me growing up in the ecosystem, and I'm always grateful for your mentorship and guidance and support. So thank you so much for always being obviously with me and also with BAN.
No, thank you so much, Bea. It's been an absolute pleasure to see how you have grown BAN and where it is as almost a guardian, or rather it is a guardian to the startups. And this is, BAN is the first, Bangladesh Angels is the first name that comes to mind whenever a startup is looking for guidance. We say, go to Nujur Bhai, go to Bangladesh Angels.
Besides Legal Circle. Definitely right, but thank you so much. We always start these sessions with the question, right? And it's always interesting to hear from people. Where did you grow up, and what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I was born in Chittagong, now Chattogram, and I grew up there. I was there up till the age of 18. And I think so my mother is a teacher. She's actually a principal of a couple of schools. So from a very early age, I think from the age of 15, she got us involved in teaching, which was really good for my, thinking on your feet and public speaking and all of those skills. And I sort of took to it, and I thought, yes, probably I'm going to grow up, sort of take over from mom, run the institution. But I think it was in class when I was 15, I just woke up one day and I decided I was going to be a lawyer. I don't know where it came from, which is why I say law is my calling. Because I woke up and I knew I was going to be a lawyer, and that was not easy in 1995, right? We did not have any family abroad. We lived in Chattogram. The law school that I could go to in Bangladesh was DU. But then we heard about session jots, session jams. So the only option was England. But then, would I be able to make the grades? Whom am I going to live with? There's a whole lot of things. And let's just say it was highly unlikely that I would be able to get to that dream. I think the only reason I got to it is because of having a very supportive mother.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of a tough thing when you aspire to something, but maybe I think I see that with a lot of founders as well, right? Is that unless there's people around you who've been successful in that, it's very hard to find those templates. And I think sometimes also then to kind of find the resilience maybe to say, okay, well, this is a path that's worth taking because, well, where will it end up, right? So I know I identify with that quite a bit. And so then you went to UCL, very good school, and then I guess then the question becomes, you made it to that part of the journey, and you might have had many different options. Why come back to Bangladesh and practice law?
That's a great question, and this is something that was instilled in us from when we were children. That you have to come back, you have to serve the country in whatever capacity you can. So as we were just discussing before this session started, is we are 4 siblings, and 2 of us are back, and the 2 remained back and that's another interesting story, because when I and my brother came back, and he's a far better student than I am, he's distinction from the London School of Economics, but we had a really difficult time because as you said, unless you have someone in the profession, it's extremely challenging to make it, right? Be it Chattogram, be it Dhaka, and none of us pursued our parents' professions. So it was actually us who, my brother and I, we told the younger 2 that don't come back. Do your thing in England, but we all know that eventually all of us must come back, and we must, sort of respect our mother's goal or the teaching that she has given us throughout our lives, which is to serve Bangladesh, even to whatever small capacity that you can.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, I guess, the story behind founding of Legal Circle? Because I do feel like it's one of the legendary kind of law firms in Bangladesh, and even people who've been part of Legal Circle or were so part of it have gone on to big things, including Nofal Bhai. But I'm just curious, how did that start, and how did you guys end up kind of coming together?
So the story with Nofal is it's again serendipity, because he's obviously from Chattogram, and we went to the same school, and he's my 4th brother. He will introduce me as his elder sister, and I say he's my 4th brother, right? Because we went to the same school. He actually went to my mother's school, and every evening he'd come to our house to study English or study with my mom. And believe me, there was very little studying done. It was him giving us political speeches, and I from what I know of him, fun fact, he apparently gave his first public speech at the age of 5 in front of God knows how many hundreds of people. So that's so when he went to London, it was, I was his local guardian. Then he came back and obviously had to join his sister's firm. So that's how it sort of came together. In terms of my journey into Legal Circle, again, something that just happened. It's not something that I really thought about regarding, this is going to be a, so many people firm, or it has to have so many offices across the globe. It's just a whole lot of hard work. And, when I was pregnant the first time around, I realized I needed to be closer to home so that my husband also had an opportunity to spend some time with the child. And I wanted that flexibility to bring my child to work. So that became Children to Work. And I'm very happy to say that all 3 have been doing office with me just at about when they had crossed 40 days or so.
And we were talking about that it's literally part of their kind of blood to be exposed to the legal profession. And I also find that quite interesting, I think, as a question, because obviously one of the things we're trying to do is trying to, we have that, you and I are working on this question of how do we kind of create more female investors, female entrepreneurs. Do you feel that, had you, as maybe it's too much of a hypothetical, but if you had kind of continued working for others, this kind of flexibility would have been quite hard to create for yourself?
I do believe so. But one of the reasons, or one of my goals with creating the legal circle was to bring that work-life balance. Because I do not think you can give your best to work unless you're happy and content in your personal life. And your children obviously are a very big part of it. So we are not the first female founded law firm in Bangladesh. I think we are the second. But we are the first firm in Bangladesh to have a child facility or a creche. And surprisingly, it was the men who brought their children more to the office than women.
That's quite interesting. And before we go to obviously the work you're doing with startups, I'm very curious for you. Once again, Legal Circle is kind of the go-to name in kind of legal circles of in Bangladesh. No pun intended. But what are some of your kind of proudest achievements, I guess, outside of the startup sector when it comes to the work that Legal Circle is doing?
So in terms of the work that we do, I think, and by the way, I have two jobs. So during the day, I actually do litigation. I have a senior. I work with senior advocate, Mr. Prabir Yogi, and that's my day job. And then after 4 or whenever court is done with, that's when I come and do my work at the Legal Circle. So in terms of the work that I'm proud of, I think what it has been, and I've been working with my senior for 8 years now, and the learning curve was amazing. It was almost a vertical learning curve. It was a lot of work, but the amount I've learned. And one of the most fantastic things there is, other than him being one of the best civil lawyers in Bangladesh, it's also the fact that he is the lawyer for Bangladesh Securities and Exchange Commission. And with my love for company law, which is tied to securities law, obviously, I had the fantastic opportunity to have many one-on-one lecture sessions, if you like, from assistant directors and directors of the SEC itself, telling us where they're coming from and why a case should be decided in a certain manner, so that we could place our submissions. So that was amazing for me. I don't think I would have gotten that learning anywhere else. Other than the startups in the last year, obviously we all know of Startup Bangladesh's 7 investments that have been just launched. We've also been privileged to draft up the memorandum and articles of Startup Bangladesh, hoping to also be involved in the Shoto Borshe Shoto Asha 50 startup, the investments into the 50 startups that are going to take place. We did the Paperfly transaction very recently, the Taka 100 crore investment. And a couple of other things would be, and this is just recently over the last year or less than even, we were involved in a PPP tender where our client wasn't very satisfied with the way the technical outcome was, and we challenged it, and we were very successful. So that tender had to be stalled. Other than that, in the last year or so, I take great pride in having edited 2 legal books. Not the author, but edited, one on estoppel and one on the unwritten constitution of Bangladesh.
That's the unwritten constitution of Bangladesh. I find that title quite interesting.
Isn't it? I'll send you a book.
Sounds good. Sounds good. But I know that's also something like I found that quite interesting reading about you, that, from the early days of your career, you were very much about kind of digitizing the legal knowledge, right? And making it more accessible. And I feel like that's a great segue into the work you're doing startups and digitization. But yeah, we would just to learn more about Think Legal and some of the work you've been doing there.
Sure. So Think Legal came about. So this is something I felt from very early days. As lawyers, when we come to Bangladesh, I'm sure you've heard nature is we don't get paid very much. So obviously, even the idea of buying books is, law books is, do I buy a book or do I not? Because, obviously I can't afford it. Even the 150 taka digest, becomes a consideration. And, having come from England, even then we were using, while we were studying, we were using, online searches. And it made life so easy. I remember I was doing this research for a case on letter of credits, and there are at least 1,000 cases on LCs filed in Bangladesh every year, and I'm quoting a very small number. But when I went to do the search, I found about 7 cases reported, and that just didn't make sense. Where are the judgments going? And I sort of dug into it, and what I heard is a lot of reports are not interested in publishing, right? Because they have their favorites and whatnot. So there was a whole lot of considerations, politics, if you like, or bureaucracy in the publishing environment, legal publishing environment. But the aim remained that legal research should be easy for lawyers, irrespective of which stage, and especially at the early stages. And that's how Think Legal began. Now, Think Legal in itself, amongst the legal fraternity, has garnered, mashallah, a very good name. And it's known for its collegiate events that we do, and our lecture series, and the videos, and the infographics, and the articles, a whole array of other things. But that's very much our nonprofit work.
Got it. Moving to kind of the work you're doing with, I guess, a different type of, depending on whose perspective, maybe sometimes it could be like pro bono work. But yeah, I mean, how did this work with startups begin? How did it come about? Because you've been doing this for quite a while, even before all this, the scene has really come into its own in the last 12 to 24 months, right? And so how did it start, and what gave you that idea to kind of start getting involved?
That's a great question. Thank you. So I believe it was 2011, yes, 2011, 2012, that I met Fayaz Tahir at the British ambassador's house, where there was a round table. And I believe Saif Kamal was the one who introduced us, and we sort of hit it off over Socrates. And Fayaz was like, Abba, would you want to do some mentoring? And 2011, I didn't have very much work, but I wanted the work, and it didn't have to be, money has never been the number one goal. It's about, harnessing your skills. And, I'm always very conscious of the fact that our profession is a public service, right? So harnessing the skills, giving back, learning as you go, on the ground, if you like. So I said, yeah, would love to. And that's how it started. I think I started mentoring with Startup Dhaka. Then I met Minhaj Bhai. And then it has been a list. And, it's great because this work that I do with the startup ecosystem sort of keeps my public speaking skills and practice ongoing, which feeds into the litigation that I do, which again feeds. So it's become a very nice synergetic process. Challenging, but perfectly matched.
And it kind of reminds me of what Minhaj Bhai also talks about is, the different things she does all feed into each other, right? And so it's hard to take one away from the other as part of, obviously, both your professional identity and maybe even personal as well. And that's quite interesting about Fayaz Bhai and Socrates. So I'll have to quote it next time I speak to him. I didn't realize I could see Saif doing that, but that's awesome. That's really awesome to hear. And
And the
I
quote
guess, I mean,
actually was, I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in and tell you. The quote actually was, I know one thing, and that is I know nothing.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And so that's quite fascinating to me as well, the timeline you put out, because to me, like, obviously I came back in 2014. There's been, Child Ella was 2013. I forget which year Bcash was, formally founded and all that, but that's quite early, right? Like 2011. I mean, it's been a 10-year journey. It's been, you could say that you've seen this kind of ecosystem literally grow up in front of your eyes over the last 10 years. And I guess, then the question becomes, obviously you mentioned Startup Bangladesh, but in terms of just that kind of journey, what's been some of the positive developments? And for you also, I think, being very involved, what are some developments that you wish or you are waiting for, but it's yet to happen?
Right. Again, fantastic question. Yeah. In terms of watching it evolve, and I have to say, although I was probably one of the earlier mentors, I was definitely not the first. So all credit to Fayaz, Samad, Mustafiz Bhai, Minhaz Bhai, all of them. Sajid Rahman Bhai, amazing person, right? What I've seen, or how I've seen the ecosystem evolve, and I have to say, I have been learning with the ecosystem, right? Because as lawyers, we tend to focus on the law. But while mentoring with the ecosystem, I've learned also the various nuances and the considerations, again, using this word way too much, but the mindset of startups, the mindsets of what does an angel investor look for? What does a VC look for? What should they look for? What should the companies give at a certain stage? So these are all things that I'm learning as well as we grow together. In the last 10 years or so, what has been wonderful for me to see is how the ecosystem has come together synergetically. So there's a whole lot of synergy between all the people working together. I wouldn't think I don't think it's so much competition as camaraderie. So Bangladesh Angels, I've mentioned Startup Dhaka, Minhas Bhai's Better Stories, Startup Bangladesh, Founders Institute, North South Incubator, we see YGAP, all of it. Everyone's there, everyone's helping each other out. And that's beautiful to see. As you know, during COVID, how we all came together to form the Bangladesh Startup Consortium as well. And put together this beautiful document, which was a policy paper, right? I honestly am really proud of it. I think we should put it out there somewhere. This is an excellent piece of work. Whether it got to any or amounted to anything is a different topic, but the way we all came together, worked, relentlessly, didn't we, to put it together? And then coming together we all of us, especially during the COVID times, came together to give free consultancies, guidance, etc., to startups, helping from each of our different positions. And that is what an ecosystem is. That is synergy, and that's been wonderful for me to see. In terms of what I think should happen more is, I think we're now, especially with Startup Bangladesh now in the fold as well, being a government VC, I think we should lobby for more upstream intervention, more policy, more even laws. Angel investing is not, angel investments as such is not recognized. The term high net worth investor is something we have in the Securities and Exchange Commission alternate investment fund rules, but we don't have angel investors defined. With that comes the benefits of tax. So once we get there, we can also lobby for tax breaks, as they do in Turkey and UK, as you learned from one of your recent sessions as well. Also, so yes, tax is something I see startups struggle with, not income tax, year-end income tax, but withholdings in the different industries. Also, as I said, tax breaks, talking about, opening up or possibly having conversations around opening offices abroad, repatriation of funds. These are very high up in the list of discussions that need to be had. So more upstream intervention, I believe, is what is required now.
And you're right. So I think for the benefit of those in the room, so during the course of last summer, I guess, I think at least 30 different kind of entities came together in the startup ecosystem, led by Tina Jabin, Miss Tina Jabin, the CEO of Startup Bangladesh, and a very empowering personality. But and then we put together a document to essentially, I think it was one of the, at least in my experience, I think maybe with the exception of this alternate investment policy in 2018, is one of the few examples of a startup sector-focused policy document that that has also kind of taken input from everybody else. I feel like that we kind of offered then to the government as a means to kind of guide their interventions in the startup sector. And I think the capitalization of Startup Bangladesh is one example, one tangible experience that came out of that. But you're like, I mean, would you say it's one of the? Would you say that like it's one of the first examples of like just a startup-oriented kind of policy intervention that the whole ecosystem has been putting forward?
Absolutely. The way it came together, not just from any one, it was not a narrow vision. It was a 360-degree paper. And we had, mentors, startups, startup CEOs, investors, everyone come together and try to create something which would work for the country and for the ecosystem as a whole. Just to go back a little bit, Nijoy, one other thing I'm really proud of in terms of the ecosystem is how open the ecosystem is to women. If there is one place I feel being a woman does not require that extra bit of work, it's the startup ecosystem. And just to add to that, we love Tinapa.
That's quite interesting. I guess compared to maybe more traditional sectors of society, you would say that the startup sector is much more gender inclusive as a culture.
Yes, absolutely. And more I see in discussions, there is actually discussions around just going out there and finding more women who are leading startups and including them in the conversation, helping them out. Bangladesh Angels, Women Angels network that you've created is doing exactly that, fostering that system. Also the new work that you're doing around connecting NRB Bangladeshis to the local ecosystem. That's amazing work as well, needs a mention.
Thank you. Before we go more into the legal, and obviously I've got burning legal questions, the audience as well, but this is also to me always interesting, is talking to people who have delved into angel investing. And I know you've started doing that a little bit in the past year or so. And I know you made a couple of investments, or at least commitments. Would you be able to talk to us about those? And I suppose, why now, right? You've been in this sector for a while. What was the impetus, I guess, to start getting involved or transition from being a mentor, advisor to now also being an investor?
So that was natural progression. In the last 10 years, I started startup mentoring where there wasn't a lot of work and I had a lot of free time. So why not utilize it? To now where, mashallah, touch wood, quite busy. And then it becomes, it requires some thought to find the time to do this. But, you have to give back to what has given you, but also in terms of why I'm angel investing at this point is because it was natural progression, but it's also because I know the teams. One, I have the funds. And two, I trust the people who I have invested in. And I know business is a risk, but if it's money lost in the hands of these people, that's fine with me.
So that's the first and foremost consideration are the, I guess, are the people running those companies and the relationship you have with them.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
And do you, because this is also a question that comes up, well, what do you think about valuations? What do you think about exits? Do those come to mind as well, or?
This is one thing, and this is a learning I've taken from litigation and in fact case law, which is you must let experts do their work. I understand the law. I will advise on the law. Valuation is not something I am, an expert in or I have learned formally. So, this is something I draw a boundary on. This is not, I will be happy to introduce people who I am happy to introduce people to when they need valuation advice to the right people, but I will not give it myself.
Got it. So I'll go to, and we've got about 23 minutes left, so we'll go to some of the questions from the audience as well. But I do have to ask a burning question that I get all the time, and I have ideas on it, but I still struggle to fully answer it, which is, how do I get my money into Bangladesh, especially as an NRB? How do I get my money out if I invest in a startup? How would you answer? I'm sure you face that all the time as well. So how do you answer that question?
So the first thing I say is, first you have to be clear on what you're investing in. Are you investing or are you, sort of giving a donation? So because these are two very different laterals. So if you're investing and you're investing in a company, it's very easy to invest in Bangladesh. Send it from your bank account to the bank account of the company. Do not send it from your sister's bank account to the founder's bank account. No. So the money has to come from the person who will hold the shares to the account of the company because you're subscribing to the shares of the company. At the time of exit, recently, even during COVID, we've seen quite a few circulars and notifications from the central bank. And one of those which gives me hope for further reforms is the notification which allows any company to repatriate up to 10 crores quite without going through lengthy procedures. So if you're exiting for amounts less than 10 crore, the process has become much easier. But what the company has to ensure at the back end is that the compliances are done properly and regularly. If the company you've invested in hasn't held its AGM for 3 years, then you won't be able to take that exit until all those compliances are updated and filed at the registrar of joint stock.
And 12, 10 crore, 12.5 million, that's pretty significant. And especially for angel investors who might be putting in tens of thousands of dollars, even if they get a 10X, that's like 100K, right? So that falls underneath the threshold. If it's a 10 crore kind of threshold, and obviously, and as an angel investor putting tens of thousands of dollars, even if let's say you get a 10X, which is obviously an amazing return for any kind of angel investment, that's still quite underneath that threshold. So as with regards to angel investments, that is quite beneficial and quite helpful, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
Absolutely. And then with regards to another question I grapple with all the time, and a lot of founders do as well, which is this idea of re-domiciling, right? So maybe you start out in Bangladesh, maybe that's where you capitalize it with your own capital, friends and family, maybe some angels, small angels, but then you want to go get bigger money, so you want to go to Singapore. You can potentially do more interesting and more startup-friendly forms of instruments, but it does seem to be a bit of a gray area. What is your kind of thought on this movement to re-domicile into other outside jurisdictions?
You're right, it is quite the gray area. The short answer is you need central bank permission to incorporate a company abroad. But and that's re-domiciling. If it were just a branch, then no such permission is required. But if you're incorporating a company, then central bank permission is required. Also, if you're holding securities abroad, the central bank is required to be informed about this. Now, What we have to remember, though, is what is the thought process of the central bank. What the central bank wants to do is curb money laundering, right? So the challenge or the issue is to go through the process of explaining to the central bank that in me incorporating abroad, it does not mean I am intending or I have laundered money. What it means is I am taking my company outside because I see more scope of expansion there. And if you give me the permission, then I will follow your reporting mechanisms and I will bring back the money I earn there to Bangladesh and pay taxes on it. Now, is this an easy process? No. As with a lot of things in Bangladesh, it's a very lengthy process. We have done this, we have gone through this process with a startup who did it, if you like, the right way. It took more than a year, I can tell you, closer to two. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is, I know that a lot of people decide to take the risks because it's a risk if founders still want to go ahead and do this. We hope there will be policy changes as we move forward because the startup ecosystem now, once again, I'm going to put it out there, now we have a government wing to Tinapa and Startup Bangladesh with her, under the guidance of our Honorable State Minister, Junaid Ahmed Palak, who is being also guided by the Honorable ICT advisor. So it is well within the purview of their vision on where this is going. So I'm very hopeful and optimistic about changes coming, but it will need lobbying, but I'm hopeful. Let's leave it at that.
Well, going back to the earlier part of the conversation, it does sound like one of those upstream problems that we have to tackle as an ecosystem, right? And provide clarity whether you're a large startup or just starting out. And to your point as well, the vast majority of founders, they're not looking to launder money abroad. They're actually doing this to bring money from foreign investors into Bangladesh, right, and make themselves also. I deal with a lot of obviously NRBs, but also international angels, and they are quite forthright with me or forthcoming with me in saying that. And so I think, I think part of it's a communication challenge that maybe we have to kind of take up as an ecosystem to be able to make it much more clearer for entrepreneurs to do so.
Absolutely. And as we just have to prove to the central bank that we're doing it the right way. And by we, I mean the startups. I think we need to show them that prove our good intentions, if you like, bring the money back, and then they'll be more open to giving the permissions more frequently.
And that's always an important priority for the government, is bringing money into Bangladesh. So that makes a lot of sense in terms of positioning that. Another question, the vision I would love for Bangladesh Angels to pursue is, obviously we're going after high net worths at the moment because that's how it's structured. But I'd love to be able to go after the ordinary retail investor who might have, 20, 30 lakh taka into the share market and may not be that happy right now or in the last 10 years, maybe diverting some of that into startups and potentially, I guess, doing a form of crowdfunding that occurs on an angel list or in the US or Crowdcube in the UK. But part of that is going to be, to manage that is quite difficult to have, 50 people on a cap table, especially if it's small checks. And so the ideal scenario would be creating special purpose vehicles or, I guess, pass-through entities that could bundle all these small investors that could come into a cap table of a company kind of as one entity. What do you think about that? As I understand right now, that's quite hard to do legally, as well as from a compliance standpoint. It gets quite expensive, but curious about your thoughts on whether or not we can get to SPVs in Bangladesh anytime soon.
Great thought process, Nijar Bhai. And actually, very interestingly, we've just had a conversation, I think, last month with a foreign organization, which was looking to do exactly that in the energy sector. So the issue then becomes that of taxation, I think. Because when you're investing in startups, if they're ITES, you do not have any, so the income tax is waived, right? There's no income tax. But then when you channel that into another entity, that is not tax exempted. So tax is paid at that level. And then does it make sense for the shareholders to do that investment? So the way around, I think the way the government has thought about this or enabling this is the concept of the funds, the AIF fund, the VC fund. But then, as you very rightly pointed out, that's only open to, amongst others, the high net worth individuals, and you need 2 crores on your tax declaration to be that. So something else to consider also apart from SPVs, can we get that threshold, make it lower?
Right, and so allow those from a lower tax bracket to subscribe to these funds, and then maybe that's one kind of indirect way to get into, I guess, alternate investments for these smaller investors.
That's right.
Makes sense. And then the final question I would ask from my side, and this is also becomes a challenge for me, in any deal, maybe for smaller ones it's a little bit easier, but obviously when there's a lot of different investors coming in together, then the question becomes, a key kind of sticky point becomes valuation. And obviously, internationally, the way that, angel investors kind of get around that question are through instruments like safe notes and convertible notes, where you are sort of kicking the can down the road as far as valuation is concerned. You're giving certain parameters, but you're not assigning a valuation right away. You're not taking shares right away. You're essentially kind of gonna, you're giving money now, but you'll take shares later. Is there a possibility of are there ways to do that right now in Bangladesh? And two, is there any possibility of introducing such forms of instruments in Bangladesh in the future?
So this is something that I've been asked to advise on in the last 6-7 years quite frequently, and my answer is this: it's a contract, it's a legal contract, you can put it in place. The question becomes that of intent. Will the company that you have executed the safe note with or the convertible note with, are they going to honor this document? Are they going to disclose this document at the next round? That is the challenge, and that comes down to gentleman's agreement, or rather understanding and trust between parties. So can you enforce it? Yes. If the company decides not to honor you, you have the litigation route. Do you want to get into that play? In Bangladesh, I don't think you do. With our rule of law index, we're 168 or in the 160 range out of 170 something. So that becomes the issue. But having said that, do I see this in play? Yes, I do. We have seen convertible note agreements executed between the company and the investor. But again, it becomes a matter of trust. And you sort of have to do your due diligence on the target to figure out whether this is something they will act on. The other thing around it is in convertible notes, very recently in a transaction that I have been a part of, in the convertible note also, when it's a hefty amount, they put in an observer right. So that can be a way around it, just to make sure that things are going the way you expect it to go. And that in 3 months, if a board meeting isn't held, that something might be off, and you can then raise it yourself and find out what's going on and why you're not being made a part of the meetings of the company, or you're being kept out.
But therein lies the sort of ambiguity, right, in the absence of sort of a regulatory framework on that, because if you're a shareholder, you might have certain reserve matters or reserve rights. Obviously, if you're not a shareholder, you could attend those meetings, but you may not have the legal recourse if any kind of your rights are changed literally in front of you. And so that therein lies, again, once again, it sounds like an upstream challenge that we have to advocate for? And obviously there's international best practice that we can try to apply potentially in the context of Bangladesh. I've just got one addendum to that question because I'm getting this a lot more, which is startups are coming to me and saying, I don't necessarily need to raise debt. Actually, I've got, decent kind of cash flows. The problem is they don't come in on time. And I can't get enough loans from banks and financial institutions. So I love to raise debt through you as Bangladesh Angels, right? And what is your opinion of that as far as private debt agreements, and particularly and whether or not we can start applying more and more of that as far as venture debt into startups?
My opinion on this is very simple, and it is that we cannot. Okay, let's break it down into two. Can you give private debt? Yes. Can you take interest on the private debt? No, because there's legislation and licensing around it, which is why we have bank licenses and FI licenses. If you're not, again, sorry, just to close the loop, if you have a company which pays up and you go under the radar, fine. But if you don't, if it comes to the public eye or the regulator catches on to it, then you have a dispute in your hands. You have a challenge on your hands.
So it almost has to be written in as some kind of a service agreement with some kind of a payment schedule, but it's not really, you can't necessarily collateralize it. You can't necessarily do those kinds of things, right? Directly, at least.
Yes. The other thing, Nijam, is basically a lot of the laws that we're working with need reform. I'm not saying a complete overhaul, but certain parts of it, and which again goes back into the upstream intervention that we are talking about. But I think slowly we are getting to that point, or we already are at the precipice of being at the point where we are able to identify and move for change.
Excellent. I know we've got about 10 minutes left. I'd love to open up the floor. Also, so just to kind of finish up, right? I've got two questions for you. So one is something I've been grappling with, and and you've seen the case of Bangladesh Angels, right, where less than 6% of the members are women. And so I guess one question would be, how do we get more female investors into the startup ecosystem from your experience?
I'm seeing a lot more women, and I've actually met so many women investors through you, Nijhar bhai. I want to know how you're finding them, but you're doing such an excellent job. I've met such wonderful women through the the Women Angels Network, and I can see myself being friends with a lot of them. So I think you're the right person to answer that question, actually.
Malika knows, just a bunch of LinkedIn stalking people.
I honestly think there's so much more opportunity, especially in Bangladesh, for women to get involved. And, whether it's a matter of connecting them to the right people or finding the right opportunities, I think there needs to be more of a push for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the message I would have in any such exercise is to say that we have this fantastic lean-in group in the startup ecosystem in Bangladesh. Everyone's really willing to help. The women are also very, very willing to help. So anyone interested, please come join. Malika, please tell your friends as well. I for one will definitely be telling my friends. If not a startup founder, then at least they can invest.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
And then, this is always kind of fascinating to kind of ask questions of people who achieved a certain kind of place in their kind of professional life. But looking back on your career so far, both as a legal entrepreneur, right, which is quite interesting. We talked about it at the beginning of the call, and obviously an investor and advisor to startups as well. What do you think has been a key or some top keys to your success, and what advice would you give to others who aspire to your role?
Fantastic question, Nijhar bhai. Thank you so much. I don't think I've quite achieved a lot yet. I honestly think I'm just about to hit 41. So I think I've just finally come to my own. I'm ready to take off. So there's a very long way to go, inshallah, for me. But in terms of what I have learned, it's basically, as I was telling Malika, patience. It's a game of patience. Be patient and work hard. There's no alternative to working very, very hard. For me, startup ecosystem plus the law. But it also helps with the fact that I actually am an introvert. The challenge for me is going out and networking, not so much staying in and studying. So that helps. And since I read Malcolm Gladwell's book on the 10,000 hours, I have constantly set myself the 10,000. I painstakingly every day insert how many hours I've worked every day. And I started this, I think, 7 years ago. So just keeping yourself motivated. বাংলায় বললে মাথা নিচু কাজ করতে থাকো আর কিছু না. Don't listen to anyone, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, just work, and you will know when your time comes. And there's no need. The other thing I believe honestly is what is meant for me will come for me. I don't have to try to jump ahead and take something, or try to take what has not naturally come to me. It will come. Just have patience.
Just out of curiosity, how many hours are you at now in that counter?
This is my third 10,000 and I am at 3,000.
Got it. Got it. Maybe we can have another kind of follow-up call in your I guess quintile kind of anniversary. But Anita, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. Thanks a lot for being a supporter of Bangladesh Angels, and thanks for doing this call. It was a great experience.
Thank you so much, Nijabhai. I was quite nervous to begin with, but you made this so easy. Thank you for being wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone on the call as well. Thank you guys so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for patiently listening to us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.